Hi, I'm Kevin Harrington,
I'm Samba Bachili,
Nina Vaca, Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Group.
an original shark from the hit TV show Shark Tank.
CEO of ADS Group.
The largest Latina-owned workforce solutions in America.
I first identified myself as an entrepreneur when I was 15 years old.
My mother and father immigrated here with a suitcase and a dream. I had a front row seat to entrepreneurship. I am living proof of what is possible in this country.
Today, the marketplace is very tough.
The challenge for African market today is its access to capital.
The number one reason why we can't scale as entrepreneurs is access to capital.
What makes Glow so different and so powerful is the access to experts, gurus, mentors, coaches, financiers, venture people, money.
When I started my business, I immediately went to engage with different communities, different platforms. Glow makes that experience digital. A digital platform makes it so much faster and so much easier for you to meet like-minded people.
The financial platform that Glow have that make Glow unique.
Glow is about commerce, Glow is about community, and Glow is about having access to capital.
Glow is an asset to every entrepreneur in this country and globally.
It's about helping you take your business, your idea to the next step.
Hi there, and welcome to Business Acceleration 2.0. It's the show where leaders go to grow, and we're thrilled that you could be with us today. My name is Michelle Lemons-Pacenti. I'm the CEO and founder of the Global Leaders Organization, or GLOW as we call it. In fact, GLOW is one of our sponsors for the program today. GLOW is a membership organization that was created for the entrepreneur. We're founded on 4 pillars of community, because every entrepreneur needs their own peer group to connect with. We're founded on commerce, because as an entrepreneur, you want to continue to build and grow your business, and we help provide that opportunity through our marketplace. And capital. Every entrepreneur at some point seems to need capital, and we help them access the capital. So we all know that there's plenty of capital out there. It's just the access to it. GLOW helps create that access to the capital, whether it be debt or equity. And then finally, content, which is why you're here today. Our other sponsor that we'd like to thank is the Business Finishing School. Business Finishing School is an online program to help you as an entrepreneur take your business to the next level. It helps you get your business to where it's more sustainable, profitable, and sellable. And let's face it, I mean, every entrepreneur wants to be able to sell their business at some point. And even if you don't want to sell it, it sure is nice when people come up and want to buy it because you've been so successful. That's what BFS, Business Finishing School, does. It's 48 modules. It's got over 100 videos, and it truly takes you through the step-by-step process to get your company to where, again, it's profitable, sustainable, and saleable. All right, so I said our 4th pillar was content, and you're here today to hear from our speaker, Mr. Dave Nelson. Dave's a really interesting individual. He comes from us, not from the land of Lincoln, but from the land of LinkedIn. So Dave joined LinkedIn, and we all know what LinkedIn is, the social network, the professional social network. He joined in 2004. So fully 1 month before Facebook was launched. Can you believe that? That's hard to even imagine, isn't it? He was one of the first 99,000 members of LinkedIn, and now there's over 800 million. So you can imagine, I'm sure he's got a lot to share with us from then to now with LinkedIn. So Dave got deeper into social media, and he founded a company called TalkShoe.com. And he introduced at least 10 million people to live podcasting. So back then, there were no iPhones, just iPods. And that's why it's called podcasting. Today's hot new service called Clubhouse is essentially the same thing that Dave started with TalkShoe concept. And it turns out that being too early by 15 years is a real thing. So Dave, you believe that every company is a technology company, even if you don't sell any kind of technology in product or service. I mean, technology is how we get things done today with greater differentiation and higher profit. So Dave is here with us today. He's been recognized by E&Y as Entrepreneur of the Year. He's a Speaker of the Year with Invistage, and he's Tex Canada's #1 top speaker. And you might also, which I'm really interested in, to know that Dave, he actually makes an award-winning wine, which is really fascinating. So from social media to winemaker, we want to hear it all. Okay, without further ado, Dave, welcome, Dave Nelson. Thank you for being here with us
Hey,
today.
Michelle, so glad to be with you. And, as somebody who runs a software company by day, sort of fun to get your hands dirty as a winemaker. So that's why I do that, along with loving to drink it.
Oh, that's so fun. Well, we're going to hear all about this. So, okay, let's start first back in the beginning. You were one of the very first individuals that was on LinkedIn, or one of the first 100,000, 99,000. Let's talk about that. Let's just dive right in. What was it like way back when?
Oh my gosh. First of all, we had no idea this was going to become what it has become. 1 month after I joined LinkedIn, that was when Mark Zuckerberg launched what was initially called the Facebook. And who knew? But I got to tell you, I found something really useful to do with LinkedIn right out of the gate. And so, as you mentioned in the intro, I started a podcasting company in 2005 called TalkShoe.com, Talkshoe.com. Check it out. Anybody can do what we're doing here, a live interactive podcast. I don't own it anymore, sold it in 2016. We could talk all about selling businesses, but it almost didn't happen. And here's why. So it was April 1st, 2005, when I had this idea for TalkShoe, and I hired my very first employee. His name was Aaron Browser. First of all, if you're going to build an internet company, what a great last name for your first employee, Mr. Browser. But I laid out for Aaron, he was a product manager. Now, what product managers do, they take a look at the market. They look for groups of customers. We call this market segmentation, groups that you could solve with a common solution. They do the competitive analysis. And ultimately, especially when you're a software company, a product manager writes what are called the product requirements, essentially a specification in words for what the system must, and that's a keyword, what the system must do. And once you get all that documented and the basic design of what you're envisioning put together on paper, then you start to hire engineers. And it was funny, we were less than 1 month into this project, so it was still April 2005. I was busy selling my first software company back then. And so Aaron and I would meet at a local Panera, and he would update me on everything he'd done for the week. He was full-time, I was Saturdays. And he says, Dave, I think we've got a problem. And I said, oh, really, Aaron, what's that? And he said, I found a company that is doing the same exact thing as your idea. And I thought, well, that's not really a problem early on in any market. There's a lot of players before, the market sort of shakes out. And that might be a confirmation that we're on the right track. And he said, oh, that's not the problem, Dave. Here's the problem. These guys have the same exact idea. They've been at it for 5 years. They've raised somewhere between 50 and 100 million in venture capital. And the thing is failing. I mean, go check it out. It's called Ingenio, and it's a ghost town. That was when Aaron had my attention, because if 50 or 100 million dollars in 5 years can't put an idea on the map, hey, I have ideas all the time. I'll try something else. And my next thought was, I didn't say this out loud, but I wonder what 2 weeks severance calculates out to, because, I can go after something else. We didn't have to do this idea. And I had another thought. I wonder if I could find some former employees from Ingenio and, get the inside insights, not trying to steal any intellectual property here, but the inside insights into what's going on. And one of the things you can do in LinkedIn, even back then, but even better today, LinkedIn is a search engine for finding people. And people think about it as for finding a job. That's one of 9 different search modes in LinkedIn today. But another one of the search modes is what's called people search. And you can set a simple filter, show me all the people who are former employees of any given company. Now, LinkedIn was small back then. My network on LinkedIn was small because I was new to it. And of course, Ingenio was a relatively small company. And yet I found 9 former employees in about 30 seconds. One of them was living in the UK. His name was Barry Arnold. And long story short, a 30-minute conversation with Barry gave me the key insights about what had not worked at Ingenio. And so I decided to go forward. And Aaron and I ultimately produced that requirement spec. We raised a few $1 million. We hired a bunch of engineers, and anybody can go check out TalkShoe today. And it came that close to not being done. There are so many great things you can do with LinkedIn. And this is just part of the free service. Premium levels give you more features, but I would suggest this. What, as a business person, do you want to know about your competitors? Because they've got probably 2 to 4 times more former employees than current employees. And anything you want to know, those people want to impress. They're not going back to work for your competitor, right? They've already moved on. Anything inside insights. And so, hey, we could talk about LinkedIn alone all day, although I hope we get into a little bit broader attack on social media here. But those were the early days.
Wow. Okay, I have to ask the question. How did you come up with the name TalkShoe?
Okay, so initially the company was registered as PCS, the People Connection Service, right? Bring people together in these live interactive podcasts. And so that was sort of the grand concept, but that's not a very good name. And I was always impressed as a kid. Now, as you can see, if you're watching on video, I'm a bit older. FYI, I'm a baby boomer. And I was always impressed as a kid by the Ed Sullivan Show. And I forget what nationality Ed is from, but he did not speak English perfectly. He had an accent, and he would always say, "Tonight we've got a really big shoe," more or less like that. And so all the good domain names are taken. So you can't get talkshow.com, but you can get talkshoe.com. So it's a really big
Oh,
talk shoe. And then, of course, after that, we then stumbled on to Get Smart and the shoe phone. And so we just had more fun with this name. So, you
gotcha.
got to be a little creative in naming when you want to own that domain. And one other thing we did was we went out and bought all the domains that sounded similar so that no matter how people spelled it, so you could spell it TalkShoe or SHU or SHOO, a domain protection strategy so that none of our competitors could buy, say, a domain that might mistakenly be typed and have people
Right.
go to them instead of us. So this is all part of playing the internet game. And now I think I've already revealed myself as a bit of a geek. I am an engineer by training. I run software companies, but I still believe, as you said in the intro, every company is a technology company today. And a lot of business leaders don't do technology. And I think that's an outrageously dangerous strategy in a world of accelerating technological change. And so if you're one of the people listening and you're in that sort of, I don't do technology, that's a mindset that can be changed. And so change it, please, or get out of business, because we're all running technology companies. It's where the profit and the differentiation and the margin and all that good stuff comes from.
It's really interesting. I just had the conversation this morning. I was at a meeting and we were talking about social media. We were talking about you coming on today. And I said, I've got to get on and start doing the social media in a manner where I'm doing it every day. Do you think it's too late? That was one of the questions that came up.
It's not too late, but also good news. I don't think you have to do it every day. So one of the overriding principles, before we even talk about any of the particular social media services, one of the overriding principles of what we call inbound marketing, right?
Mhm.
Instead of having to go out and broadcast our message and go to the trade shows and buy advertisements, that's the outbound stuff. Why not get people to come to us? That's the inbound marketing. And probably astounding if you're not very familiar with the internet, but do you realize that every single day, half of all the people who take to the internet aren't navigating to a known site? They're not typing in a specific address, talkshoe.com, to go there. No, they're typing in something that is a search phrase that represents where they want to go, but they don't know their destination. So half of all traffic every day starts with a search. Why not get our fair share and more? And so that's the reason of why inbound marketing is important. And here's the thing: Google favors content that people engage with. So let's say you create a piece of content. Maybe it's on a LinkedIn company page, or it's a blog, or it's a YouTube video. You create a piece of content. They may indeed serve it in response to somebody typing some Google phrase. But if people don't end up engaging with the content, they click on it and then they leave relatively quickly, Google moves it back off at the top of the rankings. And so the only way to win the search game, if you will, getting our fair share and more of the internet traffic that's starting at mostly Google, by the way, 92% market share, we've got to create content that people engage with. And then as Google sees that, they start to feature our content more. And here's the thing. If you try to do content every single day, I see two potential problems, Michelle. Number one is you may well overwhelm your target audience because we're all busy. And so I don't, frankly, as much as I admire what you do, want to see content from you every day, just to be honest. But number two, and maybe this is the bigger problem, if you're trying to create content every day, how do you keep that quality bar high? How do you get people to truly engage every single day? That is a devilishly hard job. And by the way, not hard on day one. Right now, you probably have a million things, or maybe literally 100 things that you could say blog about or tweet about or post on LinkedIn about. But the problem is you start to use up what you know, and creating good quality, engaging content. I hope people remember one word: engagement. To create that good quality, engaging content gets harder and harder and harder. And so I see so often people go out at a sprint and they have not understood they're entering a marathon that has no finish line. So I'd rather see you create content maybe a little bit more slowly, prove you can sustain the pace at high quality engagement, and then you can pick up later. But don't go out too fast. It happens all the time, and then people usually give up and quit. And if you think about what I'm talking about here, just think about your own life as a business person. You're overwhelmed with information coming at you.
Right.
And really, probably the scarcest resource that humans have, over which they have any control, is their attention. And in fact, we can pay attention. I think it's so interesting. We use the word pay with attention to only one thing at a time. And so our attention is the scarce thing. And we're only going to pay attention to something in a world of information overload if it has value to us. And so your job as a content creator, if you want my attention, is to create content that's valuable to me. Yeah.
Right.
Engaging. That's it.
Right. Engagement. Okay. I know that you've experienced some personal benefits from all of this. What are some of those personal benefits that you've experienced with business?
Well, the number one, I think, biggest benefit, even if you're not a content creator, but starting to engage with the good quality content that is out there, let's say LinkedIn. To me, that's where most people should be. That's the professional social network, especially if you sell to other businesses, what we call B2B,
Mhm.
business to business. LinkedIn has so much great content. The value of engaging is it accelerates your own learning. Why should I learn at only speed one, my own experience in my business, when I can learn from so many others? And so I would suggest the big benefit here in business is learning faster than the competition. And I'm reminded of an old saying by author Peter Senge. He wrote a book like 3 decades ago called The Fifth Discipline. And he said this about business: there is only one sustainable advantage. One, only one, and that is the ability to learn faster than the competition. So the big benefit as a business leader to engaging in whatever form of social you find valuable to you as a consumer is to accelerate learning and bring that to your whole organization. And so I think people should spend a certain amount of time reading what's on their LinkedIn feed, that sort of main page when you log on to LinkedIn. Those are your people, and that's a customized news engine built for you based on your industry and your job title. But I also think there's probably some great podcasts out there, some great TED Talks. There's so much good quality content to accelerate your learning. So be a continuous learner. That to me is the key. And probably, Michelle, anybody watching or listening to this podcast has already bought into that. So I think that was an easy sale.
Yeah. So let's stay on the LinkedIn conversation. Since you
Yeah.
were there basically right there in the beginning, and you know LinkedIn far better than I do, and probably better than anyone listening. What do you think is the most valuable thing about LinkedIn?
Okay, cool. So great question. So I've already talked about one, conversations with your key competitors, former employees. Like, what do you want to know? But here's the next one, and this one might even be more valuable. I'm not sure which one of these is number one or number two. LinkedIn has a connection graph of who knows whom. And I know a certain number of people, but the question is, how many people do they know? This is what we call a second connection. So the people I know directly, that's a first connection. The people that they know, that's a second connection. And when you add one good quality, and so I'm really into networking on LinkedIn as if it's real world. I'm going to only connect to people that I know and respect and will be willing to help, and hopefully vice versa. But when you add one good quality connection, first connection, that opens up on average, because of the size of LinkedIn, 500 second connections. Now think about this. If I want to, say, sell my services to, most of us in sales have certain titles that we are targeting. So let's say I like selling at the C level, so it's going to be a CEO. Well, if I look at how many CEOs do I know directly, say here in my territory, I'm coming to you from Pittsburgh, that's only going to be a handful. But if I look at how many CEOs they know, I'm going to get that on average 500 multiplier. It turns out that, birds of a feather, CEOs like to hang out with CEOs or know a lot of other CEOs. And here's the thing, that 500 multiplier, I can ask the people that I'm connected to, my first connections, for an introduction to those second connections in real life. And so I might call up somebody I know. I've got a friend named Darren, who's the CEO of a company that builds apps. And let's say Darren knows somebody I want to connect to, a guy named Larry. Hey, Darren, how well do you know Larry? Turns out he's on his board of directors. You're on Larry's board of directors. That's fabulous. Could the three of us have lunch somewhere near Larry's office? I'm buying. I think I can help his company with social media strategy. Now, the old way might have been a cold call. After I'd identified Larry as a potential customer, I'd pick up the phone and I'd cold call him, or I'd email him. And with the what we call gatekeepers out there, there's no way that you're going to make that connection. It's a voicemail not returned, an email not returned. But if I call Darren, Darren, how well do you know Larry? Could you set up lunch for us? Darren, who knows me quite well, is going to contact Larry and suggest that there might be benefit to Larry for the three of us meeting. And sure enough, that lunch actually happened. And at the end of 1 hour together, Larry said, essentially, Dave, I had no idea social media had these kind of benefits. Could you come back next week? I'll buy. And so as the salesperson, or the person in sales mode, then I wasn't even having to name the next steps. Larry did it. But that never would have happened without Darren as that bridge. And so to me, the real value of LinkedIn, especially for anyone who is in sales, and like who isn't in sales these days,
Right.
it's those second connections that you can reach through a mutually known acquaintance, a person who can introduce the two of you. That's only going to work, though, if you're being fairly careful about connecting on LinkedIn as you would in real life. And so that's my advice. To make LinkedIn really work for you, connect as if it's real life. It's not MySpace and it's not Facebook.
Okay, so then I'm curious. I have people that reach out to me all the time that want to connect, and I might not know them, but they always send me a little message. Do you not connect with those people?
I do not connect with those people. So I'll tell you my quick test for whether we would connect or not. Number one, do you even really know me professionally? We spend an hour together on a podcast, or I'm often in front of an audience for 3 hours talking about, social media for business. I don't think that defines us knowing each other. So you don't even know me professionally. So it's got to be somebody where there's been a longer term working relationship, so they know me and I know and respect them, right? You are sort of the average of the company you keep. So I try to surround myself with people I truly respect and admire and can learn from. And the third question, so do they know me? Do I know and respect them? Third question I typically ask myself before connecting is is this somebody that I'd be willing to help for free if they asked for something? Because I would expect the same kind of thing in return. It's sort of a reciprocity test of sorts. And so those are my rules. Now, how you use LinkedIn probably determines your connection rules. But I think for my use cases or applications of LinkedIn, those are the rules that make sense. And so I would say this to anybody: be strategic about who you connect with. Figure out what you're trying to do on LinkedIn, and then have a connection strategy, which requires bi-directional agreement, right? To connect to somebody. You can always follow somebody without that bi-directional agreement, but to actually connect to somebody, both parties have to agree. Have a strategy and be intentional. I think LinkedIn will work much better for you.
Okay, so let's keep on the talk of social media. You're an expert on social media and you speak about it. Why is it important for businesses or business owners to be concerned about YouTube or look at YouTube?
Okay, so I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that half of all internet traffic starts with a search, and I cited Google's market share at 92%. But part of that 92% is the second largest search engine in the world. So google.com is the first biggest search engine by far, but number two is YouTube, which is owned by Google. And so here's the thing: if you as a business person are not creating compelling content and posting it on a YouTube channel, which costs nothing, at least you don't have to pay Google or YouTube, obviously, to create content and edit that content, that does cost something. But if you're not creating video content, you're missing from the world's second largest search engine. I mean, this is more important for most businesses than Facebook as a search engine, certainly than Bing or DuckDuckGo or even Amazon as a search engine, unless you happen to be making your business entirely as on the Amazon marketplace. So for most businesses that are listening to this podcast, YouTube is more important than any other search engine except for Google itself. And so you got to create some compelling video content. Now, back to the earlier point about creating content every day. Creating a video is hard. And so if I were blogging, I might be blogging once a week, but if I'm doing video, it might only be once a month or once a quarter. And so the medium that we choose probably also dictates the frequency of posting content. I will say this: your audience, as long as you're regular, so my keyword would be regular as opposed to often. As long as you're regular about creating content, those that discover you and value your content, they'll be there next time you appear regularly at a regular period. And I got to cite a history podcast by a guy named Dan Carlin. And, he does a quarterly podcast. I love it, right? I know it only comes out once a quarter, and I'm ready when it comes out. He does a lot of deep dive research. He can only produce one a quarter. It's okay. He still has my attention and my loyalty, because I have learned what his regular period is. So just be regular. It doesn't have to be often.
So, okay, you mentioned Facebook. Do you think Facebook is an important search engine for businesses?
Mostly not. So I'm going to be a little bit controversial here. I'm going to say that probably Facebook doesn't matter too much. We'll throw Twitter into that category and TikTok while we're at it. If you sell to other businesses. B2B, those aren't the tools. Now, if you sell to consumers, those are probably your top tools. So if you are you're selling to consumers, you're running a coffee shop, you better have a Facebook page. You probably want to be tweeting periodically. If you're driving a taco truck, that's how people are going to find you. Post some nice short videos on TikTok. But for most of us that sell to other businesses, we're not going to find our audience on those, what I would call consumer-focused social networks. So if you sell B2B, my top list would be LinkedIn, have a blog, which should be powered by WordPress probably, although there are other platforms. WordPress is open source software. You can get a hosted account for under $100 a year. It's not expensive. And you can put out your blog posts, which you own, you control, and then I'd be doing YouTube. And by then I'm probably done with, resources, and I'm targeting my B2B audience. So
Right.
It depends on what kind of business you have, but I put those three at the top, and Facebook and the others lower down. Now, here's one thing everybody should know about Facebook. So if you are selling to consumers, you're running that coffee shop or whatever your B2C business is, then Facebook is super important. If you have a Facebook company page, and that's what, per terms of service, you need to have to be promoting your business. You shouldn't be doing this through a personal page. So you have your Facebook page for your company. If you post content, and this is a change that goes all the way back to 2014, Facebook will show it to virtually nobody that clicked like on your page. So you worked really hard to get, say, 10,000 likes. You put out some content on your Facebook company page. Maybe 10 people are going to see it based on the Facebook algorithms. Here's the thing. Mark Zuckerberg and company are running a public company, and they told their users Facebook is free and always will be. So how are they going to get money? And so they look around, and it's like, the businesses will just reduce their visibility, or what they call reach, to essentially zero. And so that is the reality. And so the only way to make Facebook work for any business, the B2C businesses that might find application there, is to pay to boost your post or otherwise advertise, because it's probably zero visibility if not. Same is true on Twitter. Fewer than 1% of all tweets are actually read. And same is true on Instagram. So I couldn't invent less efficient ways to talk to a target audience and try to use those social networks without paying. That is where we stand today.
Okay. I'm just curious on your thoughts with Elon buying Twitter. Do you think that that's going to change a little bit?
Oh my gosh, the fox is taking over the hen house. By the way, full disclosure, I totally love Elon Musk. I am a Tesla Model 3 driver. I was one of the first people in the world to qualify to get the full self-drive software, which came out on October 11th, 2021, a day that, at least in my diary, will live forever. So I like Elon a lot. But that said, there's a lot of hard things about running Twitter. And so they've been up against a lot of challenges, which they acknowledge. Bullying, hate speech, promoting violence, misogyny, all sorts of bad stuff happens on Twitter. And for that matter, the other social networks, just, sort of the best and the worst of humans is there. And so Twitter is trying to moderate all that. Fake news, right? A lot of that out there. They're trying to moderate that. And Elon, in acquiring Twitter, one of his, as we talk here in April of 2022, one of his visions is Twitter as a more open platform, a more free speech platform. And hey, I love the First Amendment as much as anybody. I'm entirely in favor of free speech, but without unleashing all those other negatives. And so a lot of people at Twitter have been trying to walk that very fine and difficult line for a long time. I think Elon is in for a, let's just say, interesting, I won't use the word rude, but interesting awakening as he starts to move into owning that thing and taking it private. Probably going to happen. That's my guess. I'm super curious to see what happens next. I will say, I think he's likely to be wildly successful financially with Twitter. They have more or less for 8 years and running now been stuck at the same size, and they are very sporadically profitable, not mostly through their history. And when you're a public company and you're not making money and you're not growing, your stock price is going to be, let's just say, interesting to people who have billions of dollars. And so I think Elon can get in there and, even if he doesn't change the whole free speech per his current vision aspect of Twitter, I think he might stir it up enough that it catches fire. It's so small compared to, say, Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, that there's a lot of upside. So my guess is he's going to find that it's going to be the rich get richer. He's going to make a pile of money on it, but probably in a way that's different than what he thinks, Michelle. At least that's my take on it right now. I can't wait to see what happens next. Twitter is definitely ripe for innovation.
Definitely be interesting to see what's ahead. So I'm curious, there's the whole influencer marketing and there's all that affiliate marketing. What are your thoughts on both of those, influencer marketing and affiliate marketing?
Well, first of all, anyone in business needs to know that if they do engage with affiliates or influencers, that has to be explicitly disclosed, right? So you can get yourself in trouble with the government if you're paying somebody and that's not clear. Your audience needs to know that. Now, that doesn't necessarily destroy the credibility of your representative, right? We know everybody who does a television ad is probably paid to do that ad. So, I mean, we're okay with that. But do make sure that you're very upfront about, what's going on, what the relationships are. Now, that said, the question is, and this will apply more to consumer-focused companies than business-focused companies. So I'm thinking B2C, not B2B. But who has your audience already? That's an interesting question. If they are influential with your audience, then I think there's a potential for that relationship. If they're simply influential with some audience, but it's not your audience, I mean, like, what good is that? And so you're really looking for, and this is true also for B2B, when you select any kind of tool and any kind of campaign, you're looking for, is this where my audience is? And if it is, then go for it. Otherwise, buyer beware. It might feel good that 1 million people are hearing about you, but if those million aren't your potential customers, or a high percentage of them are not, then what good is that? So nothing against it, but make sure you got good alignment there between your target audience and their target audience.
And then what about the whole conversation around cookies? Not the kind that
Oh,
was.
no, I know you're not talking about Mrs. Fields cookies, which I
No,
love.
definitely
Of
not.
course. So, by the way, Mrs. Fields did not pay me to mention her cookies. Yeah, so let's just say more generically, tracking, right? That cookie is one tracking mechanism that operates as part of your browser experience, be it Chrome or Safari or what have you. But there's a larger issue with tracking, and from the perspective of, say, Facebook or Google, companies that really, I would say, are making their money based on advertising, the more they know about their individual users, the better they can target that advertising. And frankly, as an end user, I sort of like that idea. Show me ads that are relevant to things that I might want, and don't show me ads to things that aren't, right? There's no way I'm going to buy accessories for a GM product because I'm a Tesla owner. So there is the opportunity, through knowing more about me, to better serve me. Let's put it that way. An advertisement is noise when it's not relevant, but it can actually be pretty useful information when it is relevant. Now, all that said, there's a huge downside to this whole idea of being tracked, and it is your sacrifice of privacy. And so anytime you're using a free service, and this would apply to, say, Facebook or Google, for example, Instagram, etc., you're using a free service as an end user, you're not paying, well, you are the product being sold, and maybe not just to that particular company, but to whoever they choose to sell to or remarket to or share data with or what have you. And so I think we have given up collectively, at least in the United States, probably too much of our privacy in exchange for these free services. And I got to recommend a short 90-minute movie. If you're a Netflix subscriber, you should go watch a movie called The Social Dilemma, and really understand the trade-off that you're making there. Now, probably people know that Apple has changed its tracking on its iPhone. So every time you interact with an app now, you say whether you want to share your data or not. And most people, now that they're sort of hip to this idea of privacy being sacrificed, are closing down that trackability. And this reportedly cost Facebook about $10 billion with a B, $10 billion in revenue last year, because they're not as easily able or as accurately able to match ads to us. And same is true with Google. And so the game of leapfrog certainly continues. And so they're changing their algorithms and changing their profiling. And, I think this is just going to go on and on. I'm for being an educated consumer. I've got nothing against using Facebook or Google. In fact, I'm a huge Google fan. I use Gmail, et cetera, et cetera. But know the trade-off you're making. Be an educated consumer. And that's probably those are my thoughts on cookies and more broadly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious on your podcast, since you've been in the podcasting industry since the beginning, before it even existed. Do you do podcasts today that are SEO friendly?
I don't. I'm not currently running a podcast. I've been more blogging lately, but that's just because hey, I started it 17 years ago, and I've got
Right.
a good attention span, but not that long. So I move on, other things. I'll probably go back to podcasting someday. But let me put in a quick commercial for why the viewers or listeners to this show should be considering podcasting themselves. And it's this: when you create a form of social media that requires somebody's eyes, and so we're talking a YouTube video or a blog that they have to read, we cannot do other things as humans when we are reading that blog or watching that video, which means if you want your content consumed, and that's the form, you have to somehow get that very busy person to shed something else that they're already doing. And that's that's a
That's
tall order.
hard.
That's
Yeah.
hard. Whereas podcasting, what I love about podcasting, especially the audio only podcasts and even the video podcasts, I often listen to only the audio track.
Right.
You can multiplex audio with other things when you're physically engaged, but not what I would call cognitively engaged. A good example would be driving the car, mowing the lawn,
Right.
exercising. And so it turns out that we actually have a lot of available time for anything that comes through the audio domain to multiplex with some physical activity that's not too brain intensive. And so I think that it's probably easier for most people to create a compelling podcast and find an audience because you're playing to, essentially available time that most people have. And just when I look at my own behavior today, I spend exceedingly little time on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, etc. More time on LinkedIn because there's a lot of value there. Not so much on YouTube videos, although I'm big into TED Talks. But when you compare to how much time I put into podcasts, audiobooks, or other things that are in the audio domain, that's my go-to.
Mhm.
You got to be a continuous learner to
And
succeed
and
in business and audio. And so
and
that's why I love podcasting.
and do you make them SEO friendly?
Okay, so yes, here's the thing.
Are
Uh,
you conscious of it? Like it's
yeah. So let's talk about SEO for a second, search engine optimization. We mentioned earlier that half of all internet traffic starts with a search, but on what words or phrases, right? And so there's no good reason to use terms that are not searched regularly. And let me give you an example of how counterintuitive this is. I was working with a company that sells janitorial products and supplies here in the Northeast. And they were primarily using as their phrase janitorial products. Now you can go to Google. You have to create your Google Ads account, but you don't have to spend any money. There's a tool inside that shows you search behavior. It's called the Keyword Planner. And here's what you'll discover. In New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, three very large states where this company sells its janitorial products and supplies, people actually search for the word janitorial products about 10 to 100 times per month in those three states, whereas they search for janitorial supplies, as opposed to products, supplies, between 1,000 and 10,000 times. Anybody can go look that up. That data is current. You can go check it out with the Google Keyword Planner. And so as you use your words or phrases, why would you ever use janitorial products when people rarely search for that, when you could use janitorial supplies? 100 times more searches. And I can't explain why people in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania search for janitorial supplies 100 times more often, but that's what the data says. And so we're going to be data driven. So all of us need to do the keyword research to figure out what phrases apply to us and then use those words. And that was a long way of getting back to, in a podcast, even though it is spoken audio, there is such good technology now for doing speech to text, and then that text gets fed into the search engines, that you should, as you speak, in a very natural way, of course, be saying janitorial supplies is what we're about, and
exactly
not using the phrase janitorial products. I mean, that's astounding, and that's real data. Like right now, anybody can look it up, and who knew that unless you go
right.
check it out? So you've got to use your words and phrases, even in audio content and your YouTube videos, because the words will be indexed from spoken to text and then search. So yeah, there's SEO, search engine optimization, in short, in audio.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, what do you think the state of social media is today? Give us kind of just a highbrow on that, where you think it's going.
Wow, that alone we probably spent an hour on, Michelle. So let's see. I am super optimistic about the future of technology, but I'm not real excited with where we are on social media right now. There's, first of all, an overwhelming amount of information, too much information. So it's so hard to get people's attention. So that's one of the challenges that we all have. Again, at least create value for your target audience and trust that Google will match that audience with that value. The other thing is that there's so much misinformation, fake news, conspiracy theories, all that kind of stuff out there. And so I guess my general advice to people would be to multiple sources and be broadly curious. And so please choose a range of different kinds of feeds, different kinds of sources, credible sources, in ultimately determining what you believe about the world. And I think this is true business and personal. I do have hope that artificial intelligence, which is starting, that AI technology starting to get good enough that I think it will improve things going forward. So, we're sort of at a bad place at the moment, being overwhelmed and misinformation. I think it's going to get a bit better from here. And this is probably how most things go. In the very beginning, way back in 2005, it was a sunny day and everything looked bright. And then you start to discover, well, this has all the bad sides of humans too, right? The good and the bad. And ultimately, I think we will improve it from where we stand today. So overall, long-term optimist, even though I'm not super happy with where we are at this particular point in time.
But you're optimistic. So, wow, Dave, this went really fast. I knew it would. It's such an interesting topic.
Boom, boom, boom. And, we could keep going here for about 8 more hours, Michelle.
Yes.
So I'm game if you are.
I don't know if our audience would want that.
No, in fact,
You know what? That
I
just
would say
means you have to
respect their
come back.
time. Respect their time. Don't put too
Yes.
much content out there, right? Keep it shorter. So we probably
Yes.
already went way beyond what we had any right to do today.
Well, no, it just means you have to come back. So the content was fabulous. You continue to astound everyone with your information and knowledge in the space. So I want to thank you for spending this last half hour with us, and we appreciate you very much coming on to the Business Acceleration 2.0 show, the show where leaders go to grow. Thank you, Dave Nelson. And for people to learn more about you, they can go to, what's the website?
They can go to Dialogue Consulting, DIALOG consulting.com. They can email me at dave@dialogueconsulting.com or find me on LinkedIn. The only thing you need to know to find me on LinkedIn is my last name, Nelson, is spelled a little bit differently, Nelsen, and maybe set that location to just be the Pittsburgh area. Let's at least have a conversation there, even if I maybe don't accept your connection. Michelle, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dave. Appreciate you. And thank you all for tuning in. And we will see you next week at the Business Acceleration 2.0 program. Thank you. Stay safe and God bless.